Hello everybody, my name is Bragster and welcome back to my journey into journalism. It's been a while since I've done an update on my journey into journalism, conveniently. It's been a while. I haven't done one since the end of my first semester in second year. I've now finished semester 2 of second year, so there will be a video on that coming soon because I'm just waiting on a couple of results, but that's about it. But what I have just finished is a week of work experience at the Sheffield Star. So I thought it would be really useful to talk about my experience, not only at the Sheffield Star, but on a journalism work placement. Now, this might be different up and down the country. It might be different for different universities, this, that, and the other. I go to the University of Sheffield, so I'll be obviously talking about my experience on a journalism course at the University of Sheffield on a journalism work placement that was set up by my university. So there will be things that are different for other people up and down the country, but the one thing that will be consistent is the fact that, you know, my experience and what happens in the newsroom, this, that, and the other, I think should be consistent. So I will talk about that. So it all started online. It was all set up by Trish, who is the person in charge of work experience placements and careers advice at the university, and specifically for my course. It was set up by her, and it all started online. We were concerned that it would be entirely online. Eventually I did manage to actually get into the office, but what basically happened is I got a bunch of emails at like between 7 and 8 basically saying, this is a story, this is a story, this is a story, can you get these done? Naturally, I was a bit overwhelmed. You know, you're starting at 8 and first thing in the morning you're checking your emails and you've got like 4 or 5 stories being given to you. Naturally, I wrote those down. I was like, right, I'm going to write all these down, make sure I can keep track of what's going on. Because then at like 9 or 10, I got another story. And then you'll get some fed to you throughout the day, especially if you're doing it online. And, you know, a lot of it was press releases or varieties of a press release. Some I did have to get in touch with people for, so I had an interview at 4 o'clock that day. For a story that didn't end up getting published, unfortunately. But a lot of what I did do was published. I will get to the actual numbers by the end of the week. But that was the same for Tuesday as well. Tuesday was almost exactly the same. Just on the Tuesday, I had to do a lot more like admin-y stuff to get into the office on Wednesday. So in the end, I ended up getting into the office. Now, with the Sheffield Star, at least, they only have to come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they can work from home. So the office was virtually empty. It was very, very quiet. It was just my leader, I guess, the editor that was doing everything for me and was in charge of me during work experience, Claire Lewis. She was there, as well as Harry Harrison, who I ended up shadowing for a lot of it. And yeah, it was a really good experience to be in the office, to edit my stuff literally in the office, send it off, get it edited, and then, you know, get it published. So that was really cool. I really enjoyed that. We also did some Vox Pops. We were walking around for absolutely ages trying to get Vox Pops. It took us forever. Vox Pops are one of the most difficult things in journalism, and it was proven here. Like, even someone who had done it for a reasonable amount of time, in Harry, like, he just graduated and got a job at the Star. He even said, like, you know, it's one of the toughest things. And, you know, when Claire sent us out, she understood that it was going to take a couple of hours, you know. And it was a really hot day as well, so a lot of people were just going outside quickly, this, that, and the other. I can't tell you the amount of people that we met that aren't even from Sheffield, that were more than happy to talk to us, but aren't from Sheffield, so couldn't answer the questions that we had, which was really, really annoying. But it is what it is. We ended up going out to local businesses, trying to have conversations with them for different stories. Ended up getting back into the office, sending it all off, and then finishing off a couple of other stories that then also got published. One of those stories is literally in this paper. literally right here, my first ever byline in a newspaper, my name literally there, which was really cool. It was really, really cool to see my work in a newspaper. You know, I'd never had that before. I'd done work and had things published. I had something published in the Star, which I will talk about more in depth about in the video that should be out in the next week or so. And that was when there was a murder and I had to report on that. That ended up being on the Star's website, which was a really cool moment for me, getting a byline. But to get a byline in an actual newspaper, it was the next step. And especially when on the work experience, I'd already had a few published on the website. So that was really cool for me to see that in the paper. And it ended up not being the only one that I ended up being able to publish, because Harry was working on a story. He ended up being unavailable for it, so I ended up doing the interview, which for me was quite daunting. I know I've done videos on the channel before about shorthand. That took a back seat recently, so I've been a bit behind. So I've struggled with my shorthand a lot, and that had to come into play. Bear in mind, I hadn't practiced it in a while. I got an interview and I literally had to do shorthand and write it all down. And mainly because when you're in a newsroom, you do not have time to transcribe the interview. That was something that luckily I noticed before I went into that room, because I've noticed on the course, you know, you always set up where you'll have a week to prep for something. So if you do an interview, you can transcribe the entire thing, take things out, copy, paste, this, that, and the other, right? And then you get the quotes bang on, absolutely perfect every single time, but you have to write out a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter, and it's just contextual, right? This is where shorthand and the writing comes into play. Now, luckily for me, I was able to write it down either in shorthand or longhand, and I would be listening at the same time, but I'd only focus on writing that one sentence or those couple of sentences. Everything else was contextual, and if she said something important, I'd write a quick note to self about that. So, you know, there were certain questions that I'd asked, and it was, you know, whether someone was okay or not. They said they were okay, but the quote they had beforehand was perfect. But then later on, they spoke about, as I was writing down that one quote, they said she was okay. So I wrote down she's okay as a little reminder that, you know, she answered my question. I don't need to talk about that anymore. So that's a lot of what I ended up having to do. Now, luckily, I went into that room for the interview knowing full damn well, right, that I was going to have to do that. But this is just a pre-warning. It's hyperly useful. The shorthand, everything, even if you just write quickly, it's really useful because you don't have time to transcribe. You don't get that week to do the story. You have 24 hours from the minute you pretty much do that interview to get it out the door. Otherwise, it's old news. That is how, important it is to make sure that everything you write down, the quotes and everything, is there in front of you. And it was for me. I would say lucky, but I also think I played it quite smart. I just don't want to come across too arrogant, but I think I played it a bit smart in the way that I wrote everything, and I was able to write a really nice article, which also got into the paper and onto the website, which was really, really nice. And yeah, it was nice to see my stuff again in the paper and to really put forward a positive story, as it was a 10-year-old boy doing some charity work. It was a wonderful, wonderful story. But yeah, so that was something I had to learn, and that's something that really enforced the nature of everything you got to write quickly, and you got to write fast, and you can't mull over something for ages. You know, when on the course, you get a chance, if you find a piece of information that you don't really know about, you have a chance to mull it over, talk to people, this, that, and the other, and eventually come to a decision. You've got to make a decision then and there as to what you do next. It's tough. It's tough knowing that you're gonna have to produce 4 or 5 things a day. Sometimes it does depend on the day. Like the days where I was at home, I felt like I had to produce that many, and because the rate you were going at and the rate you were getting stories at. But on the Wednesday when I had to go out and do Vox Pops, if you go out and do Vox Pops, you will produce less that day. That's just the way it is. But yeah, it was a wake-up call for sure. So I guess this is a warning, I guess, as to be like, look, make sure you've got that under your belt, even if you don't have it fully there. Make sure you're practicing it, because if you can get those quotes down quickly, easily, without having to transcribe, do not get me wrong, record your interviews, this, that, and the other. Make sure you've got a backup there, just in case. But make sure that you're writing everything down and get those quotes down onto that page that you know you'll want. So when I was writing up that story, I could immediately insert the quotes. I knew where they were on my page. I literally, theoretically, picked them up off that page and put them onto my computer screen, and typed them all out. That's what I did. I ended up producing what I believe to be a really good piece. I mean, it must have been, because it ended up in the paper. I think that's a word of warning for people is, you know, you will need that in certain situations, and the interview one is definitely that, because judging by everyone else in the newsroom on the Thursday when I went in, everyone was in the newsroom, and you'd see people pick up the phone and be writing as they are on their phone, right? And which is all well and good, right? And this, that, and the other, but you got to think, they aren't recording that. You know, the amount of times I'd be at home and I'd have a phone call interview and I'd record it with this mic here, right? And I would record it from my phone just so I've got a backup. They don't get that in a newsroom. You are literally there with the phone, and you've got to write down their quote and make sure you get it right. Especially in press, like, because this is press work experience. You need your shorthand. You need to write quick. There is no questions about it. No umming and ahhing about it. That is the case, right? And yeah, when everyone was in the newsroom that day, I got another story which ended up being published in the paper. The coolest part was I actually ended up with a double spread, pretty much all to my stories. One was about the boy that I was just on about. The other one was about giant hogweed, which is Britain's most poisonous plant, and it'd come out on this plant tracker app that all the locations that this giant hogweed plant was at. So a lot of regional newspapers felt the need to warn the locals about where that plant was. So I did the piece about that. I did the piece about the plant, and it ended up doing really well. And I got praised for it quite a bit, which was really nice. It was a different style as well. SEO is becoming such a big thing. Search engine optimization is becoming a big deal in the journalism world. A lot of newspapers are transitioning from a newspaper to digital journalism, finding ways of getting young people to read news, right? Because in this day and age, we're not doing that. And they're noticing the numbers of newspapers dropping that are being sold. So they are making that change. With that being said, it also means that now you're seeing a lot more articles that are split into subheadings and are being optimized for Google. That is hyperly important to remember, especially when working in an organization. Ask the way they want it to be wrote. Like, not necessarily have you be walked through how to write it, but just be like, okay, what angle do you want on this? If you're unsure, what angle do you want on this? Oh, do you want this in subheadings, or do you want this more like a traditional story? Oh, do you want an extra voice in the piece? You know, all these different questions. If you've got those questions, ask them. They seem to really appreciate me asking those questions when I needed it, and when I felt like I wanted to ask those questions. Don't bombard them with 10 billion questions. You know, prove that you can stand on your own 2 feet. But if you're a bit unsure, do ask those questions, because they do help. They were really kind to me, this, that, and the other. And, you know, it was a lot of fun to be in a newsroom full of journalists, literally doing their job around you, seeing people come from court, go to court, go out and do different things. We went out and did another Vox Pop, this time in Hillsborough, for Tramlines Festival. Ended up having there's a big thing going on with Tramlines Festival, because people aren't allowed in and out during the day of the festival. Once you're in, and once you leave, you can't come back. So that was a big thing. We ended up talking to local businesses and doing a Vox Pop on that, which was really cool. We ended up doing that and being away for a lot of the Thursday, but it didn't stop me from publishing some nice stuff, which I believe to be really good. On the Friday, we had some technical issues. We couldn't get the Wi-Fi to work on my computer for the majority of the day. That will happen. But I was offered to go home and I didn't. And I'm so glad I didn't, because the opportunities I got past that point were really good. I ended up asking a lot of questions about SEO, asking what Harry was doing at the time, asking what Claire was doing at the time, and they spoke me through everything. They spoke me through a lot of the behind the scenes, the stories that we were doing. You know, I was publishing stories throughout the week. I think I ended up publishing, by the end of it, about 8 stories or 8 pieces of my work ended up on the website. 3 of them ended up in the newspaper. That was a really good week for me on work experience. Obviously publishing some Vox Pops as well. I think we published 3 Vox Pops in the end. It was a really good week for me, and having that end of the week and being able to ask those questions of, okay, so why are you doing this? Why is this the case? Like, and it made me understand that giant hogweed story that I did was in subheadings. I understood why they wanted me to do subheadings, because they asked me to do it. I was wondering why the entire time, and it ended up, the reason why it ended up being good was I trusted my gut instinct as to the way to write it, and I ended up finding out that the way I wrote it was pretty much the way they wanted it, right? With the subheadings and the way the subheadings were labelled, everything was pretty much how they wanted it. Don't get me wrong, pure luck. I trusted my gut. It's a lot of journalism's a lot about trusting your gut, and yeah, I trusted my gut and it worked, and I now understand why that story worked, why it was a good story, and why people were interested in clicking on it. So it was really interesting to see how they keep track of stories, how they keep track of which ones to do follow-ups for, etc, etc. And I would have not got to see that if my internet didn't go down. I'm really fortunate in a way that I managed to ask those questions and I had a chance to, and that they felt the need to talk to me about stuff because I was just sat there doing nothing, because I couldn't do anything. And I was rather fortunate, weirdly fortunate, I would say, in that respect. And then we ended up doing one where we ended up cracking an egg on the pavement because it was meant to be the hottest day of the year. So could we cook an egg on the pavement? Spoiler alert, no we couldn't. You know, that's the whole point in journalism. There are the serious sides where you have the murders, the robberies, and then there's the light-hearted side where you are just cracking an egg on the pavement. And because I edit, I managed to get the chance to edit that video that ended up on the website with copyright-free music in the background, this, that, and the other. And that was really, really nice for me. A really cool moment to be able to showcase my skills in a completely different manner and be like, yes, you might be a print organisation, but there are skills that I know from my broadcast side that can apply to this. That was really cool for me to be able to do. And then I managed to publish another story that day as well. I ended up being able to do that just in the hour or so that I had internet for. That's the majority of my week at the Sheffield Star. Like, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and I'd highly recommend people going out and do those work experiences. Take those leaps, because trust me, they are worth it. From the moments I got this week with the stuff going on the website and also my stories ending up in the newspaper, I will probably never forget, genuinely. So yeah, I hope this has helped people. If you do have any questions, make sure to put those down in the comments down below. And if you do enjoy videos like this of me talking about my time on my course and possibly post my course, because I'm going into 3rd year next year, and after that, then I'm in the world of journalism, then please hit that like button to tell me that you do enjoy videos like this. And yeah, I shall see all of you in the next video. See ya! I'm hoping that helped people. I really am hoping so.